Hello, history students, and welcome to CRAM number 2. See, we have some people from all over the country coming in. Yeah, little Delhi Sultanate reference already. I like that. People could just say hello if you can hear me, because it's always a sort of this act of faith. We'll do. Oh, hi. Wow. Woo. This is an excellent looking group. I'm very excited. We have some things from New York City region, well represented last week. So I don't know if we have some folks there. Yeah. Oh, yes. Bonjour. We had some hellos in various languages that got buried in some questions, not buried, but buried in some questions above about taking notes. And so I might even just start with that because a few people upvoted that in terms of what you might do. And I did mention that for the stream. So talk about that when we get things set up. I think I will. When I'm halfway, it cuts off part of my head. So, oh yeah, Delhi Sultanate. Okay. Thanks. Just a little housekeeping, because some people, this might be one of your first streams. Other people have been to several. But there is the green button there that says Practicing Community will take you to a short answer question. Now, we'll spend some time talking about the new format. And so it's not a short answer question, as you may well know, but it's like doing, drills or practices for a musical instrument or a dance recital or a sport of any kind. You don't just practice the final performance over and over again. So we'll be able to, work those same skills. And in comments, I'll try to make some connections to the different skills, or if it's not obvious, like in the one that's there now, I put context in parentheses, so hey, this is a context question. And then that prompt is a comparison question. So it's, comparison is what you're going to be doing with the documents. You'll be comparing documents. So we're going to talk a bit about comparison also. So I'm going to make myself smaller so I can share some knowledge with you all. And then you should drop some questions, into ask a question. With this many active people, we're up to, you can see 76. We're gonna have a lot of people here. It'll be more important to use the ask a question. So if you've been to some of the small, streams that we had maybe in the fall where there were just a few people, that was great. And the person streaming could keep track of everything in the chat visually, but we're probably gonna exceed that here. So it's good to see. We have some people here who can answer each other's questions in the chat too, whether or not they're your teacher or not. So, all right, that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to focus the screen like that. Perfect. And I'll go over here into this. And the slides should be linked now in the resources. I just did that. So, like 10 minutes ago. All right, I'll come back over here now and we'll take a look. So this is what we're doing. And I will talk about notes after we do the preliminaries. Okay, I'll grab that question. And if you have other questions, you can get in there. And if you haven't done the poll yet, there's a poll here. How are people feeling? And it's super evenly split. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, Mr. Little can answer a lot of questions. He's good. All right. Yeah, some of you know him from his own streams and from comments in the chat. He has a lot to offer us. Okay. So these are the free streams that are happening for other classes that you might be taking. This week, we don't have a Thursday stream to... we don't have a Thursday stream because the stream on the LEQ that I think we were going to do then, we're not going to do now because there isn't an LEQ. But you can see for your other subjects, there's usually one on Thursday nights. And then if we come here, you can see here are the upcoming ones. So a week from today at 2 p.m., the Eastern, for people who are in the class who are still doing the 20th century. Now, I know we're in all kinds of different places with that, whether your school's doing it or not, your school's still working. on the curriculum. There's a lot of possibilities, but you can do that. And you can also ask Charlie anything about the exam. She did well as a ninth grader, very well as a ninth grader last year on the exam, and she's really friendly. So she's going to do a stream on that topic, but you can, ask her other things. And then Jed will be doing a Q&A on Tuesdays, which she did today, and I was in that for a little bit. So I see some folks who were in there. I know Tanya came at the end, and William, and I know I saw Arosa. Are you here? I saw you today. Dan, right on. Hey, nice to see you. So those are the things we have coming up with that. And of course, you should be tracking Fiveable on all the various socials. And the word is that there's TikTok now. And I don't really know what that is, except that it's kind of jumpy and the Chinese state's involved. But I know a lot of kids like it, so I believe that's out there. Yeah, okay. Ooh, that'd be good. All right, we are always going to start with a source. So let's just go ahead and take a moment to look at this. And I will answer the questions, okay? Yep, traditions and encounters. That's also what I use in my class. But there's pros and cons to any book. So if someone says, I use this book and it's better. Nah, I mean, they all have strengths and weaknesses. So why don't you take a look here? And I think the question here to kind of start with is to read the sourcing information. Sourcing is now 22% of the AP exam. That is great news because it's not something you have to memorize, right? So if you read the sourcing information, and this is a tip, that other successful students have given. As Jed likes to say, it's just filled with clues. So you read the source description there. And our question to start out with will be, what are the limitations of this source? This is something that Mrs. Longnecker taught me. A better way to talk instead of bias is to think about limitations, like what can the source tell us and what things might limit what the source can tell us. So you're thinking of that historical context or the intended audience, point of view of the author. Yeah. So this is so a codex is just a word that means like the way the book's arranged. It's like loose paper, I think. It is a primary source. And Florence is like the library where this one was stored. It wasn't even necessarily made there. Yeah. Now you're just looking at what's in the source there. So, yeah. Yeah, so how might that Spanish, oh, right, Lee coming in with the Spanish Catholic influence. Again, it doesn't make it wrong. And these different codices, some of them are considered better than others. But how is that going to limit? Right. Yeah. So they have these names that are based on the libraries where they wound up, as Mr. Little is saying there. That's all right. So so it's going to limit how well we can use this source to understand. Right. So we have Mexica people or Aztec people talking to Spaniards in Spanish probably, or in Nahuatl. And then, yeah, there's some stuff going on that's going to happen in the translation. Right. The person, it is corn. Yeah, we have what we would be reading would be like a translation of a translation. And some of, we've worked across things here. Yeah. What's the technique? Does anybody know? Just as like a little fact power, the technique associated with Mexica, Central Mesoamerican people that would make this corn harvest especially bountiful by the time we get to times that we call Aztec times, because that's the kind of facticity that a person could use as evidence. Right. Jacqueline bringing it first. That is great. That's right. The Chinampa, sometimes called a floating garden, but why say floating garden when you can say Chinampa? That's what I have to say to that. All right. So we have that. And then you could even, right. We could even take it a step further. And then another question might be, what's the result of this? And so that's going to kind of be our main topic here for today. Oop, he says as he realizes he forgot to change one bullet point on this slide. So I'll fix that for what goes out. But what we're going to do is we're going to start by taking a look at the AP exam announcement. Yeah, right? Yeah, if you want to talk about floating gardens in the notes there, that'd be great. And we're going to focus on this skill of comparison. So I have a few things, and we'll work through our review plan. And then this topic on increased production, like I mentioned last week, will get a little less time, but it is something that is especially useful to use as context, because you can use it to explain some of these other big things. In this time period, the College Board created 2 units out of what used to be 3 key concepts, and they're both clearly related to 2 out of the 3. So the third one then can become context, and you can use it, especially since there are a lot of these things that kids seem to remember, like chinampas and champa rice and terraces and bananas. You don't have to know all those. You don't. But oftentimes kids, I'll find, know a few of them. And I want to kind of give you some ideas how you can use what you know to do this. So here's what we learned about the AP exam. Okay, last week we were talking about this a lot. So we know now when it's going to be. And that's a week later than it would have been, and at a slightly different time of day. Ooh, yeah, there's some good Chinampa knowledge there. We know when it will be. Okay, we already knew these other things. Now that, I don't know, Dan. I think you're gonna, whatever, I imagine, I don't know. And so the person to check with is whoever's the AP coordinator at your school, which may not be your teacher, but probably won't be your teacher, but your teacher will know who that is. And then my guess is that you'll sign into AP Classroom. And when you sign into AP Classroom, then whatever device you sign in on, you need to submit on. And you can handwrite, take a picture and submit that if you want, or you can type. That is what I know. Yeah, well then I would do that. You know, when you're little, we tell people that it's not how much you write, it's how good it is. But now that you're older, we can be honest and tell you that it's both. Now, a lot of bad information doesn't help, but it does, more is better, all things being equal, because you have more examples, and we'll kind of see that. So you should write as much as you can. And that's why it being open book can be a trap, because if you spend time looking things up, then you're not analyzing or writing, breaking the information down. Remember, right. Yep. Dalin's right there. And Dalin's been dishing the good advice in the community too. I appreciate that. So it's good to comment on other people's things. So thank you for that, Dalin. Yeah, if you're off a little bit, that's all right. So you should get as much in as you can. Okay. So open book though, if you spend time like looking stuff up, that's time you're not writing. And you only need a couple of facts. And if the question's so mysterious that you need to look a lot of things up, I mean, you're in bad shape anyways. And people who are here now are not going to be in bad shape like that, because you're starting to review now. You already know some things, okay? Yeah, don't worry about your grammar, Jayla. You just do your best. Readers are taught, and we all do. I've been an AP reader, the official, reading it. Yeah, I would, Pratana, I would kind of avoid those sorts of things. I would just do it. And then there it is. If there's some misspellings or mechanical errors, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yeah, the time will be your big thing. Yeah. I have not. I've only been a worker bee, Mr. Little. I have been a table leader. And I did AP Euro 4 times, and I've done World 3 times, and we'll see what happens. I was scheduled to do the SAQ at home, but now they need less readers because there's less questions. And so I don't know if I'll be a reader again. But one thing you should know is that every You know, you can do both things, Jude. What I'm saying is you want to do that as little as possible, because like if there's one thing like really stuck and you want to Google it, go ahead and do that. But it's not going to help you do the analysis, which is where all the points are. So yeah, I mean, I think those things are real, Juliana. Yes, Mrs. Longnecker. Right. That is correct. Okay. So that can be a trap. So here are the things that we know now. About this. So we know it'll be 5 documents, and one of them will be non-text based, is what they say. So it means it'll be a visual, but that doesn't mean that there could still be words in it, you know, if it's a poster or something, but it'd be non-text based. So with, you know, someone was saying up in the chat, you know, the size of the image can make a difference. So there's that. So if you look at this, so this looks like this is the DBQ rubric, right? It's the DBQ rubric. So these things should be familiar. We'll be going through all these things. Okay. But it's going to be scored a little differently. And I think there's a few different reasons for that. So it's going to have 9 points. At least that's my understanding. If the teachers in here understand it the same way, a few of the students were saying it was 10. You get 45 minutes. Oh, so you're all set, Amanda. So people are saying 10. So, okay, help me out. Which point am I missing here? Or did I just not add correctly? No, that's complexity is the point that some people call. There's 5 possible points for evidence. Okay, so I'll fix that too, along with my thing. So you can get 3 points for documents. Okay. All right. So it would be 10. My guess is that a 4 will be passing. That might be shocking to you. Maybe, but certainly a 5, because like 2 and yep, 2. Yeah, don't call me. I mean, I'm just telling you, it could be that low because the another one for using to support. Thank you, Mrs. Longnecker. That's the one where I missed. Okay, we'll talk about all those things. Yeah. So if you got 4 of these points, the average on last year's DBQ was 2.5. And the out of 7, and the average is almost always in the 2s, and half the kids pass. So you kind of start to do some math here. I would expect a 5 would be a 3. So what that means is you don't have to get all the points. And so if you look at this, some of you, we'll talk more about complexity as we go, but so complexity is, or the so-called unicorn thing, I've got some kind of salty, unpopular opinions on that. I think the complexity point is just fine. Very few people, 93% of kids don't get the first reasoning point, which is sourcing the documents. So I think we should all work on that first. And we're going to hit that hard. Oh, points to get a 5. Sorry, I thought you meant 5 out of 10. I don't know, 7. I mean, it's going to be lower than you think because you don't have to be perfect. So if you kind of look at this, there's sort of an LEQ embedded in here. Like you could write an LEQ and then do maybe one DBQ thing and be set, because an LEQ has a thesis, it has context, the additional evidence you can now get 2 points for. So that's like an LEQ because that's how much evidence you need there. And then complexity is also a thing in the LEQ. Like I said, in these streams, I'm going to wait to talk about complexity until, like in the practice things, we're really nailing the basic reasoning. But we'll do that. And as things come up, we'll kind of tell you how you can do it. So I just want to say that if those of you who were hoping for an LEQ, you can still, and it looks like we're pretty evenly split between happy and sad, and a lot of people kind of in the middle in the poll. Right. What I'm saying is that using evidence that's not in the document is like writing an LEQ. So if you like LEQs better, maybe start by scanning through the documents to see what the topics are, and then thinking of evidence that isn't there. And then start working on that, and then add in 2 of the documents, and you're probably going to be in great shape. And we won't know. It won't be established until kids write it, like what score leads to like what score on the test. But you do need to know that you won't have to get all 10 points in order to get a 5. So there's just no other way to do it. Yeah, it's always curved, Pratana. It's like, like I say, so if you get like half the raw score points, you pass usually. So it's like that. It's just if you're in what the thing you have to understand is that there's a lot of blanks and really low scores. And so it depends on what's going on in your school. But some of you are in classes where everybody, or at least maybe not everybody, but a lot of people are really studying super hard and no one's going to get a 0. But there's a lot of zeros in the data pool. So you don't have to you're competing against everybody, not just the kids in your class. You will not. You are here. Pratana, you will not get a 0. Okay. Don't worry, Dan. All the things that you've been doing are fine. So let me answer this question here on taking notes. I think that in terms of taking notes in the stream, you should write a little bit down and then take those notes, just like what are the key things, like no more than a page, like for sure. What are some of the words that come up that you didn't know that you might use? The very most important thing for kids now is to be able to start organizing the things they know and maybe add a little bit to it. My guess is that most of you know enough right now. It's just a matter of organizing it and working on the analysis. So you might just jot down some of those things. And then the key with notes is, yeah, great advice. The key with notes is what you do on top of them. So if you already have good notes from the class, and some of you probably do, then like going over those, or even if you don't write anything down in the stream, but you go ahead afterwards and then read through the notes that you have in this section and highlight things that came up or seem important, that would be the thing to do. I just think it's useful to have a little piece of paper out to jot down a couple things. And I do think focusing on the key vocabulary is a good idea with that. All right. So we also have here another question from Juliana. A lot of people upvoted on what to study, and it's the same, and I'll go through that here in the review. In the review plan will be part of that, but really the prompts are going to come from the key concepts, and they'll use some of the words from the themes. And so it's just a matter, and they'll ask you to do one of the skills to compare or measure continuity and change over time or causation. It's probably a little more likely to be one of those last two, but because you're comparing with the documents already, but we don't know. So really it's big ideas, and can you use examples of those big ideas? All right. So if you were here last week, you remember our plan. What are the 3 things that are going to get her done? Yeah, it'll probably be phrased, evaluate the extent to which. Yep. Or develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which. Yeah, what's slow, Rosa? Yep, good. And you're already doing that. It's 6 weeks till the exam, and here you are on Tuesday afternoon, evening, doing that, right? Those are Izzy's notes there. Shout out to Izzy. And we're going to practice. Yep. Right. Do an essay. All right, so there we go. Well, that's what we're going to do. And then as we go through that, we want these key concepts. Now, these aren't necessarily the same as the units, so that's good to review. Because like I say, it's good to review in a different way than you might have moved through the material the first time. So we have these things. And so in these streams, if you have these 3 things down, if you're looking at them, you're like, okay, what are some examples of that? So what are some examples of productive capacity? That's what we're going to look at. Okay. And then you want to be able to take the things you know and know which category they're an example of. See, so really a lot of it's about taking things you already know and fitting it in the right spot. So which categories will we be talking about a lot tonight? With increasing, yeah, right on. You can use different things. I love spice tea, but my collaborative team voted for pieces, so yeah. Okay, so if we're thinking about increasing There's a question in here that maybe if some of the other students or teachers could respond to on movies. Yeah, innovations in technology, right. Not so much politics directly. See, politics will be a result of this, although they're all always involved in some way. Yep. Okay. All right. Environment, good. Okay. Let's say economic too, how things are produced. Okay. And then this is our first time, we're still in the first period, but as we go forward, we'll start doing little games where we try to get stuff into the right period. So again, it's taking what you know and getting it in the right spot. All right, so let's do some historical thinking, and we're going to talk a little bit about comparison. So here's one way that we can think about all historical thinking, or including comparison. And that is, what you're looking for is the middle, the fiveable blue there in the middle. And that is in between the general statement and some specific example. So one of my pieces of advice for writing these essays is that you put them together in a different order than you're going to write them. Because the first thing to think about are, what are the specific examples, whether it's from the DBQ, whether it's from the documents or things that you know. And then you want to think categorically, like how can you find this in-between spot? Let me show you an example. So here's a comparison question we had up at the very end of the stream last week and didn't quite get to. So we always have lots of good questions. Okay, so this is from last week. Okay, so a similarity. So a way that this might work is, like, the basic way to answer the question is like to think of two trade networks and just say they had similarities. And there's nothing wrong with writing that down. Of course, that's not a thesis. You're not developing an argument, but it's okay to do that as long as you write something else next. So then you might start thinking about, what are some examples? Okay, well, what do I know? Well, I know that Buddhism is a culture and Silk Road is a trade route. I know this, that Islam was spread on the Trans-Saharan route. Now, if you noticed in the question, it said two different trade routes. You want to be sure you get two different ones. We have that. So then what you want to do is to think categorically. So what would be a category that you could put these things in? Because that's the wording that's going to go into your comparison statement, because that's the analysis showing where the area of similarity is. All right, so we're going to go more specific than cultural. Yeah, I went with belief systems, but if you went with religion, that's fine. But what you'd want to get in here, that would be more specific than diffusion. So you want something that's more specific than culture, but less specific than Buddhism on the Silk Road. So you want to try to find that in-between spot. And that's what can be difficult for students. A lot of times I'm reading student thesis statements. There's things in there that are evidence. Right, yeah, you could talk about syncretism too in there if you wanted. But the question's asking you to compare cultural diffusion. So you want to have something that's specific, but not the example. That's where your comparison happens. So something that's more specific than the topic, but not an example. Right. Did you see what I did there, Dan? Thank you. I tried to, so just in my visualization, when I'm talking with my hands a lot in class, I'm like doing this kind of thing, and you want to put your statement in there. And so when you're writing, yeah, right. So you want to think of the category of the similarity. That's where your analysis is going to happen. And that could be, if you have two documents, how can you put them together like that? Yeah, well, they're religious systems, and then they're different. Now, if you're ever doing a comparison and you can't think of differences, and you want to think of differences, then think more specific. And if you can't think of similarities, then think more generally, and eventually you'll find one of them. All right, let's do our power vocabulary for today. Now, this is the Freyer model. Somebody asked about this. Some of you have been tortured by these things in middle school. I'm really sorry about that. Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But used used well, these things can be really good. You just can't overuse them. Like some teachers will overuse them. It's like any good thing, you can overuse it. And so this would be if you had some note cards, if you did these, and I'll never do more than 4. Okay. But these are the kind of words then that'll create some of this categorical thinking. And they're also the kind of power words that could be on the tests. Yeah, that would be one thing you could do, Benjamin, would be with the septics. I do like that one too, I'm not gonna lie. With that, or sorting can also be geographic, it can be theme, it can be time period, like that. Okay. So here's our first one. So we need to kind of understand what productive capacity means. So what might that mean? Just sort of what does that mean about a society? If productive capacity is increasing. So just kind of think about that. And that could be something that you would put like in the middle of one of these cards. And the thing is, you need to know what that is because it could show up in a question, but you don't need to know all the possible examples, right? There you go. But, right, there you are. Thanks, Himmel. Rosa. Yep, yep. So you want to be able to come up with examples of that, but everyone doesn't have to know all the examples. Okay. So this could be a phrase here. Yeah, no, productive capacity is going to change over time, right? So we can talk about all these things in different time periods, right? Right? Oh yeah, apes is good class. These things will affect social structures. That's the one we'll talk about the least today. And then we also kind of need to understand what is meant by a luxury good. All right, so we're going to do some of these quiz things like we did last week. But these would be the 4 things. If you're watching the replay or looking at the slides, you might be like, okay, these things you need to know what they are because they could be in the question. And if you think they mean something different, then your examples won't fit. What you don't need to know is all the possible luxury goods from the medieval period, right? So Jacqueline and Dan just dropped 4 examples straight into the chat, and you only need 2 good examples in order to get the maximum points for this on the modified DBQ, right? So yeah, there's 2 more, yeah, right? Jacqueline, you're like a luxury good machine yourself. It's awesome. Keep it coming, right? So yeah, it's true. William's right. Textiles, often the answer. There's like, Indus River cotton textile remnants from 4,000 years ago that got, transported to the Middle East. So it's been going on for a long time. All right. So let's take a look here. Let's do this. Now with these, a lot of them will overlap. So when you answer, I'd like you to kind of just do a really brief, why does it fit into that one? Because a lot of them could fit into more than one thing. You might have seen this diagram. If you were at Mr. Little's stream back in, September, I took it from that slide. Thanks, man. Yep, Annabelle, that's correct. Okay, so let's take a look here. What does this show? Adithi, you had a really nice answer in community. Recognize your name, and that's nice. Yeah, okay. So how is it environmental, Sri Devi, sorry. Yeah, resources, right? Okay. Yeah. It's going to increase productive capacity by using the environment better. So I think either one of those is going to work out here. Ooh, what is that? Is that like an alfalfa icon? Okay. Okay, how about this here? Okay. Which one do you think? See if you can figure out what this is. And if you know what it is, you could say it too. You don't have to know what it is. Pratana's right, though. It is a clove. Yeah, okay. So these are luxury goods, and they're traveling all over the place. I think I mentioned this last week. There's European recipes, thousands of miles. Cloves are in like the eastern part of Southeast Asia. That's where they're originally only grown. They're buds from a tree, and there's like, yep, Spice Islands. And there's like, recipes with those things from like Central Europe, Ireland in the 1300s. So they're really traveling a long way. Yeah. Tanya and Bardana, are you familiar with the clove? Yeah, and it's interesting because cloves, it's one of those things like where a spice that's really identified with a certain area isn't necessarily from there originally. It just is kind of like tomatoes aren't from Italy, but tomato sauce is really Italian. And there's a lot of chili peppers in some foods in parts of India, and those are from the New World. Ooh, yeah, thank you. All right, see if you can figure out what this is and what it might be. Taking a look at that. It's a diagram. Yeah. Ooh, yeah, it is a furnace. That's right. It's increased productive capacity. Jude, do you know what's going to come out of this furnace? Oh, yeah, right. Logan, there you are. That's right. It is Chinese. Yep, it's iron or steel. Fun fact, steel's mostly iron, so it's the amount of carbon that's in there. Steel's like the Goldilocks amount of carbon, not too much, not too little. So yeah, but what we call iron's actually a compound too, because it has some carbon in it. Like pure iron's too soft to do anything. But carbon gives it that little bit of rigidity. So yeah, so this is long 400 years before this was happening in Europe. So making this high quality iron. So true story, Donald. I almost said 5-year plan. So this iron, and that's going to increase. This is going to show increasing productivity in a couple of ways. First of all, the iron production itself is going to go up, and that's important. But then the iron that's being made is going to increase production of other things because it can be used to make nails or agricultural implements, things like that. And that's been true for a long, long, long time. The Iron Age is a long time ago, 3,000 years ago, maybe a little less than that. But this is, being able to produce more iron is going to allow more other things to be produced. So this is going to be another example of iron making. Okay. We pause here. There are some questions. So the things that you would want to know here are, these 4 terms. Yeah, there you go. So that is water powered, and it's powering a bellows that's going to, blow air in, like push 2 things down. And then the air is going to go into where the carbon and the iron are combusting, and it's like blowing on a fire. It's going to make it really hot. Right. Yes, exactly. These would be the 4 things I would put like in your Freyer model. Yes, it's that. Right. Okay. So let's take a look at some other examples here. Yep. Yeah, we'll do Bessemer process later. And what the Bessemer process does is it really increases the bulk, the quantities that steel's being made of in. And it's cool. Yeah, John. So might just take a look here and how many of these things do you know? Yeah, bananas, right? Yep, in there. And it's important to remember, like with things like the crops, this is crop diffusion. Bananas are not being traded across the Indian Ocean. They're being grown in the new place. Yeah. Well, they do. They use both. Yeah, terracing happens in both places. We have that. No, the 3-field system, you're not going to get year-long cultivation in Europe because the growing season isn't that long. So the 3-field system is going to produce more than the 2-field system did, because the 2-field system, like half the, I'm going to go ahead a slide, then we'll come back. So here's that diagram with the 3-field system. And the fallow field then isn't producing anything, or maybe it's just being used for animals to live on or to root around on. So the 3-field system isn't that great, because later they're going to have 4-field systems. In China, it's basically like a 1-field system. They're growing stuff like all the time. That's why there's so much food. Yep, that champa rice will help you out. Logan, I like where you're going with the yams, but we'll come back to that. So here we are. So the 3-field system, what it is it's an improvement over the 2-field system, but it's less productive than things that are happening in places like China. So there were eventually, in the 1700s, European farming gets a lot more technical, and they do start using 5, 6, and 7-field rotation schemes. So we'll have that. So 2-field system would be 1 field is fallow, and then the other field, they're growing a grain on it, probably wheat or rye, like you see here. So the fallow land's not producing any calories, so half the land would be fallow. When they started using 3-field systems, 3-field systems then would be, there'd be only 1/3 of the land. Right, and then the fields would be rotated. So next year, where the wheat and rye are, that might be fallow, and then it would rotate through. Right, so crop rotation. So people have always been rotating crops. The reason why China is so much bigger than other places is they were cycling nutrients back into the fields without having to leave fields fallow. And so then with the rice, the champa rice that would ripen twice in a year, or sometimes 3 times, we're looking at a large multiplication of calories produced per acre over what was happening in a lot of other parts of the world. So that's why there's so many people there. Right. And it's not just that more food equals more people. It does, right? But it's more people, and they're not all farming. So what are some of those people doing? Right? Some of those people who aren't farming, then, yeah, they can be making these innovations. Like, who's working that steel furnace, right? Or iron furnace? Well, whatever they are, they're not farming, right? Eventually, yeah, it could work in factories. But in like China in this period, they're like really close to industrializing, although we shouldn't really think of history like a line like that, because they didn't industrialize, and that's okay too. But all the prerequisites were there. Yeah. And it didn't happen, in part because they were getting so much out of the pre-industrial system. In China and in parts of India, like in the lower Ganges Valley, where like so many people live, that's one of the most populated places on Earth. The people who lived there were so good at cycling nutrients back into the earth that they could sustain a lot larger population. But as Mr. Little's pointing out, that's not infinite. But in the 1200s, there's still room for growth within the sort of traditional system. And as that grows, there's more manufacturing in China. Okay. So we have that. So that's how the 3-field system would work. And it only seems great if you're comparing it to a 2-field system, not if you're comparing it to Southeast Asian agriculture. Okay. So terracing, we've talked about it in a couple different places. Chinampas, we did. Does anyone know the main Andean food crop here? So again, food crops that can be part of this. So these things would be context, right? These things would be context, right? That the potatoes are super nutritious, that they're allowing these things. Or somebody mentioned yams from Africa, the African yam, right? So we have those things. Okay. And we know the bananas aren't sweet, right? That are coming in. They're more like plantains, and you'd make them in a stew, and it's calories. Yeah, right. So what else is in this picture? What else is happening in Europe here? Yeah, you'd cook them. They'd be green. Mm-hmm. All right, so what's the horseshoe made out of? Yeah, right. So you're going to need some of that. Some more iron's going to be better for horses to plow things. Then we have the old horse collar here, better plow. Some of these things happen earlier in the Middle Ages. It's just worth knowing that the European population is increasing too. So at the the very beginning of this period in 1200, Europe is actually kind of rising in importance. So I put this picture in here because a lot of you have learned the lesson, which is correct, that that Europe is not the center of the world economy at this time. That's going to be in India or in China. But Europe's maybe more, we can overcorrect there. Like Marco Polo was from Venice, which was a fairly big cosmopolitan place. Like he had spices before he went. Now he was probably somewhat impressed by some of the techniques that Chinese were using. He did learn things, and people pointed that out. Yeah, Kublai Khan's court was terrific, but we don't want to like you can overemphasize that. Yeah, you could say that think of this period as the High Middle Ages, like Mr. Little's pointing out. After about 1000, the population is going up. That coincides with some climatic change, some agricultural innovations, and it all kind of feeds on itself. The thing to know, we can overemphasize the point, Europe is not ahead of other regions of the world, but it is gaining in population in comparison to East and South Asia in terms of where the bulk of the economy is in Afro-Eurasia. We can overemphasize Europe being behind, just like in former versions of this course, people probably spent too much time in Europe. So it depends on like the teacher you had and how you went through the book. Some of you probably learned a lot about Europe more than you needed to, but others maybe learned that Europe wasn't the center. I'm just trying to find the balance. Yeah, no, we have European history. Okay, yeah, William has the correct dates here, 1200 to 1450, the first time period, which we can call the late Middle Ages. Yep, China. Okay, so here's a text now. So the state is involved. It's not like politics. It's not like politics is not important, because in China, the state played a role, the government, in publicizing these things. So if you take a look here, this is a manual that would have gone out and been printed. There's printing happening in China. Maybe not printing quite yet at this time, but there's a lot of people who can write, so they're passing these things out. And so you can read this and see how this sort of this nutrient cycling was going on. So, and a lot of you, how many people have had AP Human Geo? Some of you, or even just geography. Yeah, you can use some of the things you learned about. Yeah, that's a really great class. I know my daughter had that class too. She had it in 10th grade. Or yeah, World Geo. So if you learned about agriculture in there, I know our on-level human geography class at my school, they talk about agriculture. So you can use those things. And so again, these things could be context. All right. So we have that. Let's take a look at this next picture here, which is about manufacturing. We've already mentioned some of these things. So yeah, so these are some more. These are some more of the things that are manufactured that are going out into these trade networks. Okay. Yes, porcelain is one of them. As I tell my kids, you know, a country's got a product on lockdown when the name of the product is the name of the country. So in some places, porcelain is called China, or at least when it's in plates and stuff like that. That's right, Jayla. These are all luxury. These are luxury goods. And so again, you don't have to know all of them, but you want to be able to know some. So here are some of the things that were being manufactured in greater detail. And if you can match, and some of them are primary products, like or consumer products are being made to sell to people. Others, like the iron and steel, are what we might call capital goods that are being used to make other production. Right, so lacquerware comes up, and if you don't know what it is, it's all right. It was on last year's DBQ, right? And there's also silk textiles in India too, and cotton in China. But if you kind of keep those going. So lacquerware is finish, it's wood, but that's had a finish applied to it that makes it look shiny and also more durable. So it's a luxury good. So this is like a craft. So again, there needs to be more food production so that somebody can be working on this wood all day. And again, these like artisanal traditions in places are going to move those things around. And we always need to show this picture whenever we can, because it's Mr. Lassiter's favorite. Yep. So those things continue to move around. In fact, silk manufacturing, like in the traditional hand sense, is important like into the 1900s. Like, so for the whole time you're studying, like when Japan starts to industrialize, a lot of the income to pay for modern, materials for like the Japanese military is coming from intense production in the home or in smaller factories, young women making silk textiles. Like that's still happening, right? There we are. So here we see, again, this production increasing, so the food increasing, and then in China, techniques for making the porcelain are getting better. Those are happening. So you have to think about, like last week, we were talking a lot about all these goods moving all over the place. People in the chat are correct about the networks where these things are moving around. That's happening. But if there weren't more things being made, that wouldn't be possible. And it's like a kind of a chicken egg thing. What happens first, more trade or more goods? Well, people are, they're motivated to make more because there's a better chance of selling it. And there's more stuff to sell because people are making more. So you have this kind of, it's like a reinforcing or, a virtuous cycle of a time. So just to review with that's right, Jayla. We saw this last week, but not everybody was here last week. So we have this here. Oh yeah, well, that's all right. And you can watch the replay. Now you can download the replays, which might be good on your Wi-Fi. So you want to take a look here and see if you can, you've already named, I think, all of these routes. The one thing, again, I would say is that there's a lot of movement of things within regions too. So like within Europe, within China, within Southwest Asia, that we also, can take account of. Right on. Well, this is context. It's always context, Benjamin. Right. So what you want to think, though, then is how does this production, like what does it have to do with these trade routes? So if you take a look at this now, like what you could do, like quizzing yourself, that kind of practicing. And if you like to type these things, you can, but what's being produced where, or we've already talked about, just kind of visualize where these things are that are then going out into these trade routes that we have. Right. So we have those things. So, textiles from India are making their way all the way to West Africa. And then what's going back into the system to bring those textiles there? So it's gold. And in that case, the trade route maybe predates the production. Like, so getting the trade route connected is going to stimulate more production. Okay. So you want to think of the different regions that we have that are involved. And of course, we always want to remember the Western Hemisphere, which we had. So again, these exchange networks are made possible, again, by productive agriculture, potatoes in the Andes and maize everywhere, corn. I know Mr. Little has that great slide that shows how much bigger the corn gets over time. Yep. Yeah, for the trans-Saharan trade, Jacqueline has it correct there. Then also into the Mediterranean and cross into Europe. So a lot of the gold moving around in Europe would have originally come from Africa, and European goods wind up in West Africa. Right on. So that is what we have. Now, the question that was in the chat here that I would like to get people's thoughts on here is the question a lot of people voted for things to watch. So a lot of us are inside, right? And so we're watching, some of you are probably watching more things. And so what's something that you could watch that would be a strong way to review these things? And I guess I don't, for like this topic here, I don't have any great necessarily suggestions. Yeah, Jude throws out Crash Course. I think those are actually great reviews. You know, he talks fast and it's kind of funny. And if you can make sense out of what's happening, can do that. Yeah, that's a good book. In fact, I was just at a conference where I saw that the guy who wrote that book, King Leopold's Ghost, is he is working on a book right now, or it's just coming out on the effects of World War I. Right, a lot of people like Heimler's History. That's a popular way to go over the material. I would say one thing, and so I think those are good. I would like people to go ahead and keep popping in other examples. I know that the we haven't talked about this yet, but there's a Netflix documentary on there, or like drama about the Ottoman Empire. That the periodization is supposed to be pretty good. So we have that. The MDBQ, yep, is the modified DBQ. Yeah, I would say that videos that seem to be smushing in a lot of information, like some people feel about Crash Course or Heimler's History, is that you don't have to catch everything they're saying, and it's good as review. And if you like, okay, what did I understand from that? And you jot it down afterwards, that's good. It's also important to remember that a big chunk of what you're doing is going to be working with the information that you see on the exam. So if you think of the contextualization point, that's going to be a big theme. So you don't have to memorize all those things that are in there, but you do have to be able to come up with some to be able to work with them. So anything, like if you're watching something on, like, say, Rise of Empires on Netflix, and you're looking at like the objects that are in there and kind of reading them like they're a document, and like, what do they tell us, and even trying to notice things that aren't accurate, or where you're looking at any kind of primary source text, that's good. So just, I think it's good to anything you can watch to kind of rehearse the knowledge or look at it from a different way. Any sort of historical, movie that you enjoy, then you would, then you can make some connections to things you already know. As long as you remember that when you're doing that, it's really being able to break down the information and draw connections. That's important. Okay. So anything you enjoy, oh, good, you're welcome, Dolan. Anything that you enjoy and can make connections to is good, I would say. And if you're coming to these and reviewing on your own, I mean, you're really in very good shape. You could also, if you're watching a movie like that too, you could also think, what's the context here? Like, turn to your family. They don't, we're all in our homes with our families. They might want to know about the context. So what's the context? And so one way you can think about context is that it could be what happened before. Yeah, right. Let them know. They want to know, Dolan. They just haven't told you yet. At least that's what I tell myself. So you want to think about context. Either it could be something that happened before, or it could be something happening on another theme that's that would be affecting it. So like this rise of empires is going to be about politics. And so what's another theme that's going to be influencing that? Well, these exchange networks are a part of that, how they could generate the wealth that's going on there. Yeah. Yeah, right. Talking to people, right? And there's I don't know if any of you kids use the Twitters, but there's going to be sometimes there's Twitter chats where people watch the same Netflix movie at the same time, and then they'll tweet at each other. So this Thursday, it's going to be teachers and professors, but students are definitely welcome watching a documentary on Toussaint Louverture and the Haitian Revolution. And one of the guys who's one of the historians in the movie is going to answer questions and tweet along with it. Yeah, it's this Thursday. My Twitter's in the next slide here. You can find me retweeting it, all kinds of other stuff in there. So, oh yeah, those College Board reviews, I think they'll probably come to the stuff that's going to be on the test soon. We could do that. So we'll do that. Yep. All right. So keep track. I've retweeted that thing for the Haitian Revolution. One time, Laurent Dubois, who's the historian who's doing this, who's a huge expert in the Haitian Revolution, one time he replied to one of my tweets. So it's like, I'm kind of famous. No, I'm not. I tell my kids that when I show that documentary, though. Yeah. Oh, with the AP classroom. Yeah, so Mrs. Longnecker says that it's good, but it's unlike this where we can answer questions, you can respond to each other. It's just like a lecture. Yeah, I watched a little bit of one. The person was, yeah, I would agree, was doing a good job. I think for some of you, some kids that will work, but other kids, this chat is going to be a lot better and break things up. Nobody can take in information for that long. That's why I don't want you to take too many notes on these. All right, well, that's an hour here. So I think we'll kind of wrap this up. And big thank you to Mrs. Longnecker and Mr. Little for helping out in the chat. And I know that I've also responded to some of the practice short answer questions. So you can take a look at that. I have to find some sources for us. The question from Dan in the chat here is about doing DBQ things. I had this one already queued up when the modified DBQ thing came out, but we'll start looking. I think the next thing to do would be like paired texts, like look at two sources and put them together and breaking them down. But we'll always start by doing sourcing analysis, and next week we'll dig into the sourcing even more. Today we had all that general, about the AP test. We kind of had to work that out a little bit. And then now I learned it is 10 points. So I'll tell the people I misled about that. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. It's really great seeing you. I enjoy these. I really enjoy them a lot. So we'll see you soon.